Hello, this is Forgotten Rights, and today I'm going to be talking to you about whether or not gun control is possible. So the idea behind gun control is, well, there's a ton of people committing crimes with guns. They can get the guns pretty easily through legal means, so we make it illegal to get guns, but then actually make it so there's less crime overall. So I'm going to see, is it possible? Like, could we actually substantially decrease the number of firearms owned by criminals or by average people? I think average people, it's pretty easy to decrease it, because they don't want to be associated, they don't want to be a criminal, they don't want to be put in prison. But a lot of people don't have a fear of the law, right? So is it possible to reduce it to a point where even criminals would almost like barely be able to get their hands on it, like very rarely? So I'm going to use a popular example in the United States of illegal activity that's heavily regulated and still happens. The example would naturally be methamphetamine, because that's made in a ton of small towns. So, and it's well known that methamphetamine itself is explosive. Like, people have blown themselves up trying to make methamphetamines because all the chemicals that you get for it, which are commercially available, so commercially available chemicals you can buy, mix them together, they can be pretty potent. So you can make some very powerful chemicals just off of very commonplace, very common drugs and chemicals, right? So you can make this stuff, right? So it's logical that if you can make these powerful explosives, you can probably find a way to make explosives that could power improvised firearms. So that would be my take on it. Is like, well, yeah, you can't stop people from getting explosives. I mean, and even now, we still hear federal cases about people being prosecuted for manufacturing pipe bombs. And a pipe bomb obviously is a very improvised type of explosive that's designed to work like a hand grenade, where you pack a bunch of explosive inside of a pipe, and then when that explosive goes off, it shatters the pipe and the bits of it go flying everywhere, similar to the effect of a hand grenade, right? So that's illegal under federal law. Now you can get hand grenades and I think rockets as well, like as in something you would use in a rocket launcher, but that's heavily regulated by the federal government. You need like some type of special permit, and it costs a whole bunch of money, obviously, and it obviously costs more because the government's regulating it, right? So very expensive to get rocket launchers and grenades, and for the most part, we don't see them used in crimes. So that's interesting, right? Um, but so is that regulation keeping them from being used in crimes? I mean, what crime would you actually use a rocket launcher other than just mass slaughter or senseless violence or wanton destruction? What else would you use a rocket launcher for? So yeah, I mean, I think the regulation, it could be said to be reducing the amount of rocket launcher attacks. I mean, we see in like Hamas, they're firing rockets into Israel. And it's kind of a tricky situation there that I don't really want to comment on too much, because it seems like Israel and Hamas, they've obviously both, aggressed against each other at different points, and a lot of that is retaliatory, and it's like, okay, like, it could be like a thing where it's just compounding retaliation over and over again. So, I don't really want to comment on it too much. They don't really seem like great countries at all to me. I wouldn't associate with them if I could. So in any case, so these improvised explosives, could you make guns off of them? I mean, or could you make like working firearms with those improvised explosives? Well, yeah, you probably could actually, if you kind of use the technology in an electronic cigarette lighter or something that can make an electronic spark, then you can run an electrical current through a very thin piece of wire, which could heat the wire and then set off a powerful explosive that you put inside of a pipe, and then you could throw in some, pretty much any metal object, and that explosive would push that metal object out, and it would go flying out and hit someone, right? But quality that would roughly match that of law enforcement, probably not likely. Now, there are, interestingly enough, there are cases of stolen firearms. Typically, there aren't that many. I think it's a couple dozen a year. So not none, and obviously it would be way more stolen if, or way more guns would be stolen from law enforcement if, if you couldn't steal them from anyone else. So more demand in stealing can actually lead to more stealing. So in that case, yeah, I mean, you can't stop people really from getting guns from cops. I mean, you're going to get a few from cops, but for the most part, they tend to keep their stuff pretty secure. But we are seeing it now in a country where most people can get their guns legally, unless you committed a serious crime before. We're seeing that now. So, I mean, I'm thinking, that there would be quite a few guns stolen from cops if we tried to make all guns illegal. So, if that were the case, maybe you could still get, a couple hundred guns a year from law enforcement. And then, of course, we know that there are roughly, things like 10,000 homicides a year in the United States. Maybe that's a little inflated. But, and obviously not all of those use guns, but yeah, there are quite a few gun murders, right? So a couple hundred, that's probably not enough. I mean, especially considering when they're used in crimes, if the person gets stopped, that gun would get confiscated or destroyed, right? So in those cases, you have to recognize there wouldn't be that many guns. Now, I think the best argument against it is that, there are all these guns in circulation already. You couldn't really get rid of them, or they can be around for as long as they're working, right? So then you have to also acknowledge is like all the people who know how to make guns, who can manufacture them at home legally, and who've obtained these skills legally, are they going to just not make guns when there's this huge market for it? They could potentially make hundreds of thousands of dollars off of making guns. I mean, I think people are going to do that, obviously. And with the number of meth labs, I think, yeah, people are going to make guns. Not to the same quality as law enforcement, but still pretty good guns. And I think people kind of forget how effective of a weapon a bomb is. Like, notably, like, if you read anything about Columbine, yes, they used guns, but they also used bombs. I think they were adapted from, like, propane containers. So they placed those things in a cafeteria, like, hidden under a table or something, right? So a bomb is so much worse than a gun. Like, it uses, like, a really powerful explosive that doesn't have to be tightly controlled or regulated. And with a gun, if you use too much propellant for it, and obviously it only shoots like one thing typically. If you're using a shotgun where it shoots like a bunch of pellets that don't typically have that much penetration power. If you're using if you put too much propellant in a gun, you can actually like break pieces off it internally and then make that thing shoot bits everywhere and destroy itself, right? So there's a limited amount of control you can have over a gun. Now you could say, stuff like rocket launchers exist, or you could possibly even make a makeshift rocket launcher using explosives and a big metal tube. But obviously that's hard to conceal. So it would be tricky to, get in a position where you could actually get that wherever you wanted to commit a crime or massacre or something like that. I guess massacres count as crimes, don't they? So yeah, I mean, like, if we did make guns illegal, people would probably just resort to more crude weapons. Because we see people making those already. We see people making stuff like pipe bombs already. So we know that people are using these weapons, right? It's possible to make them illegally. So we would probably see a transition from maybe more like legal, well-machined weapons, from like handguns and rifles, into more criminals using stuff like bombs. And, the bomb is harder to control, more destructive in most situations, but it's still an effective weapon. Like, and if you actually get kind of smart about how to use them, they can be far more effective than guns, right? So less controlled, so maybe they're not as good for like lower down crime like a robbery. Because like saying, okay, I'm going to blow myself up for like $200 from a cash register. Okay, probably not going to do that. But if you were smart about it, you could probably kill way more cops with bombs than guns. Like, do we remember lawn fertilizer chemicals were used to kill all those people in the like 95 or something? It was like 2 years after Waco, where that federal building was destroyed. It's like Oklahoma City bombing. Like, there are ways to make very powerful weapons illegally with commercially available chemicals and chemicals that the average person can make for themselves, right? So people can get their hands on chemicals that are used in bombs, right? So we know that bombs are going to exist. We just don't know necessarily if well-designed machines can be mass available. Now we know a few of them will be stolen from law enforcement. That's pretty much inevitable. Especially if there's a big shortage of guns, you have way more incentive to steal from cops. But overall, you could probably vastly decrease the quality of firearms by making them illegal. I think that much is true, and I think you could make guns way more expensive for criminals to get. I think that's also true. But realistically, you're still going to have people who are making or homemaking explosives that have potential to cause serious danger. And if people can't get their hands on well-designed machines that are very precise, they're going to resort to more unprecise, crude weapons, which, surprisingly, can actually be way, way more dangerous. So, general rule, I would say, you can decrease the quality, you can't decrease the quantity. And I think, sometimes in your efforts to decrease the quality, you'll end up making the quantity so much worse. What if in Columbine, they had said, well, we don't have any guns, we can't get any well-organized machines, so we're just going to plant a whole bunch of bombs around the whole school. We're going to blow up the whole school, we'll collapse the whole thing. And it collapsed like 9/11. That would be so much worse, wouldn't it have? So yeah, overall, I think if people are like really determined, they can use bombs, they can use some weapon to commit their crime. You can't realistically stop everyone, but you could possibly decrease the quality of the typical criminal's weapon. So perhaps more precise killings, like a home invasion killing, or like a small-time robbery, could be made way more difficult. So realistically, you could probably make a lot of criminals' weapons way worse, but you wouldn't be able to stop people from committing high-profile crimes and crimes where they just want destruction. Right? In fact, I would say it probably made it worse in a lot of cases if they could only commit crimes with bombs. So realistically, kind of would work, not so much though. Well, thanks so much for watching. You have a wonderful day.